Hi. So I didn't have a long plan. My goal was not to ramble on for an hour and have everyone fall asleep, including me. What I want to talk about was people often think of encryption as this sort of, if I encrypt everything, I'm all set. I have nothing to worry about. My phone can get stolen. My laptop can get stolen. I've mitigated all my risks. And I'm all set. I can go anywhere in the world, nothing can happen to me, until you go to the UK or Australia. So the United Kingdom and Australia, as an example, have laws where you have to give up your private keys and your passphrase or they put you in jail. It's the Regulatory Investigative Powers Act in the UK, and there's one with some other similar acronym in Australia, where if you cross the border and they decide to search your laptop or your phones, you have to give them all your passwords and all your PIN codes. Or at best, they will put you back on a plane and send you out. At worst, they will throw you in jail until you give up your passphrase and passcodes. The original goal of this was to go after extremists, but now it was pushed through Parliament and all this stuff as, well, we'll just do everything, for the extremists. And all of a sudden, normal average business people get themselves caught up in this. Most of them just give up their data or have started taking the EFF and EDRI's European Data Retention Initiative or something like that. EFF, similar organization inside Brussels, where they have started saying, if you cross these borders, cross with nothing. No encryption, no nothing. Wipe your laptop, download it when you get in country. At the same time, so most of my work has been with victims of abuse and trafficking, both labor and sex, although in the US, I think only sex trafficking happens. Labor trafficking never happens. That's a whole separate topic. So people will encrypt their laptop thinking they're all set, and then they pick some super simple password that anybody can guess, or they type in their password on camera, or any number of things, and then they find themselves caught out where, you get picked up by the police or your abuser or something grabs your machine, they know all your passwords, and they just go and take it all. And then you have fantastic encrypted files that are now worthless. Some of the extreme cases I've seen when working with journalists in Latin America, journalists will do something, they will start using PGP because they want to encrypt their conversations so that, because they actually are going up against intelligence agencies who are in corruption with the cartels. We'll give you safe passage through our country if you just, happen to ignore these people coming from these places. And I will skip the whole morality of the drug war or not, but that's what happens, is that cartels will bribe intelligence places or militaries, and militaries will be used to transport the drugs through their country scot-free. So the journalists will start talking to basically whistleblowers or leakers inside the cartels or the militaries or the corrupt intelligence agencies who want to say, here's what's going on, I have proof. I have copies of emails, I have copies of invoices. I mean, these things are run like a business. There are actual invoices, PO orders, payment processing, all this stuff happens. It's not like it's, some people on the street corner handing out crack one vial at a time. It's a full-fledged multi-billion-dollar business. And the reporters will say, well, here's how to use PGP or use Hushmail or some other encryption service. And then the intelligence agency, whoever's watching them, the cartel also has their own intelligence agency, and they'll get frustrated because now they know these two people are talking, but they don't know what they're saying. So rather than try to break the encryption, you kidnap the reporter's child, hold him for ransom, maybe cut off a body part, mail it to the reporter, and say, look, this is your kid's thumb. If you want the rest of your kid back in one piece, you should stop doing what you're doing. This has happened a number of times where the journalist will be like, yeah, but I used encryption, they couldn't tell. Like, well, it doesn't matter. The point is you use encryption, now you pissed them off. And you should have thought about these things long before you got to the point where your kid is kidnapped and trying to do something. And, to be fair, I've heard the same thing about cops who investigate organized crime. Organized crime will have no qualms going after the policeman's kid, tell them to stop, stop your investigation or we'll send your kid's head back in a box. And the cop is like, well, what am I going to do? Their job is to bust organized crime, not get their kid killed. And they have fantastic technologies. So the part of the thing is to think through, it's encrypt to live, but I think it's also to think through your risks. Think about your adversaries, what they're likely to do, what they're capable of doing, versus what you think they're capable of doing. And to help out, encryption is fantastic, it's great, but it's not the panacea. It's not going to solve all your problems. And I've unfortunately seen the side effects of people who encrypt everything and don't understand what they're working against, or what they're capable of doing, or what their adversary is capable of doing. If you want to encrypt your traffic because you worry about Google looking at your Gmail, that's fine. For the most part, Google has proven itself fairly trustworthy, and that it's not going to go decrypt your emails. It's not going to go share all your data. Many people are worried about this new trend of Google includes your own email in your search results, as long as you're signed into Google. But it's not like Google sharing, here's all this email we have. Now when you, Tor user, go to Google to search for something, we're not going to put in personal emails in the search results. That's not what they're doing. What they're doing is, I log into my Gmail account, I start searching for things, keywords pick up in my own email in the search results. But at the same time, encryption is a fantastic use there. My daughter and I encrypt all our chats when we talk, mostly because I don't want anyone watching on the network to learn what we're talking about. I'll guarantee you 90% of the time it's, did you do your homework? And are you ready for bed? It's not like I have some secret I spy agency with my chat with my daughter. It's literally, here I am in France or something. What are you doing? What are you up to? How's your day? There's typical things you talk about. I just don't want to share that conversation with everyone between where I am and the hotel network, hotel's ISP, the government services watching the communications back across the ocean, back to the US. That's what OTR, and OTR is off-the-record encryption. It's a plugin for lots of chat programs where it encrypts between the two users. So it's not like you have to trust the chat service in the middle to encrypt everything. It's between you two. So they can't see anything going on. The chat service just gets to see the encrypted traffic back and forth. And that's a typical usage of encryption. It's just that you don't want to overshare by default because you don't know who's listening. Anyone have thoughts, concerns? You're all just staring at me.
So I boycotted Google for like a year.
Okay.
I trust your opinion in saying we can trust them on
Well,
some grounds.
Trust them to a point. I'm not one to fall for conspiracy theories. I really want to see data, and I really want to see lots of proof before I'll believe something. Although Google did say they are working with the NSA, and they have likely given the NSA all the data they have. That was in response to Google getting attacked, Google having trouble in China, and likely Chinese authorities going after certain activists, doing super sophisticated things to get at the data Google had. I don't know. Personally, if someone breaks into my house, I don't call the Department of Defense. I call it a tactical nuclear strike because someone broke into my house. You call the local cops and see what they can do first. It seemed weird to me that Google went from, someone broke into our servers in China to the NSA is now involved.
Yeah, well, my main question goes to how do you feel about Google bubbling? I don't know if you may have explained that in your last talk, but how Google bubbles based off of IP address and how your searches are different than other people, and also what do you think about DuckDuckGo?
Google bubbling is just personalization. They're most likely giving you the data that you've already given them. They're most likely just regurgitating what you've given them. If you're a typical Google user, you sign into Gmail. I'll pick on my daughter. She logs into her Gmail account because no one asked her to prove her age. She's under the terms of service limit to have a Google account, but all her friends have one, and that's why she picked Google, because she can G-chat with her friends. And she has a Gmail account, and she's logged into a Gmail account, and it's automatic. Her browser automatically does it for her because she decided that was what she wanted to do. And Google now has a whole lot of data, has all her emails between her and her friends, which are 90% spam links. You know, if you don't forward this email in the next 5 minutes, someone will die. She's like, no way. So sometimes she'll wait 5 minutes, but anyway. Anyway, it's whatever, you know, preteen kids share with each other, which is not really a threat to anybody, except waste of bandwidth. But anyway, she does get creeped out by the ads showing up in her Gmail. Like when she actually goes into the web interface, she sees all these ads showing up. And she's figured out on her own that based on which email she's looking at is what the ads key onto. And she's like, how can I opt out of this? She's like, how can I get this to go away? And she would do a bunch of Google searches to figure out how to opt out of the ads. And then at some point she said, wait, I'm asking Google to tell me how to opt out of Google ads.
You tell her about ad block?
Yes. But the point was that, so she gave Google a lot of data. Now a lot of people give Google a lot of data. And then the Google bubble sort of personalization thing is, here's things you searched for in the past. Maybe you're more likely to get results that are relevant to what you searched for, or what data you gave us, or whatever. I mean, if you're looking for sushi places, and you just punch in sushi place, you know, I'm sure there are some fantastic ones in Japan, but if you're located in San Francisco, you probably don't want those. So it's just, it's the same targeted advertising Google's tried to do all along. They're just trying to target your search results, as far as I can tell.
And DuckDuckGo, are you familiar?
So I'm familiar. I've talked to Gabe a few times, Gabriel, and he runs a hidden service for Tor. So hidden services are the .onion domain that don't exist. They only exist within Tor. They are location-independent services, meaning you don't know where they are in the world, which protects both you and the service. So the service doesn't get to see where you're coming from, and you don't get to see where the service is. The point is that if you live in a world without IP addresses, that's what hidden services do. The DuckDuckGo used to just crawl, like be a meta search engine, but now they're trying to crawl their own data themselves. And they don't record IP addresses. I mean, so part of the problem is, here's what they've said. They don't record IP addresses, they don't profile you, they don't store your history. They offer a hidden service so that if you want to be completely anonymous, you can go through Tor hidden services to crawl or to search DuckDuckGo. How do you prove that? I mean, they seem to be saying the right things. They seem to be saying, we don't need to track you. The goal is to give you search results, and the ads pop up based on the keywords you typed in. How do you prove the negative? You can't. They say they don't collect it. The only way to prove that is they have to open up their systems to everybody and say, here are my log files, and do that. I believe that Gabriel is trying to do the right thing, where he sees his market as the anti-Google. Here's a search engine that doesn't do all the stuff Google does. We don't want your email. We don't want all of this other crap. We just want to give you search results. So he has every reason to stick to that plan and not leak data or not screw up, because that's his entire business model. He seems to be growing. The other one like that is StartPage, the default search engine in Tor browser, because StartPage is just recrawling Google results and stripping out all the personally identifying stuff you could possibly send to Google, other than your keywords. I mean, if you type in, you know, my name is Andrew at 123 Main Street, then both StartPage and Google knows who you are.
Isn't that a cop-out though? Because if you're saying, well, they say this, but we can't prove the negative, well, then there's Hushmail that says this, and well, what the other? I mean, that's an excuse, or like, there's no, it's like no practical answer to it.
Right. It comes down to trust.
Yeah,
and reputation. That so far, DuckDuckGo has not leaked any of your data, has not recorded any of your data, and the ads show up based on the keywords, not based on past history of your searches. So the reputation seems to be that they are doing what they say. What else?
So,
yeah.
Perhaps a new topic, getting into risk assessment, figuring out what you really have to expect, because, I mean, there's definitely the extreme cases like journalism in troubled countries and people who've had run-ins with very dangerous people and pissed off very dangerous people, and then the rest of us who
Right.
probably don't need the same level of security. What's the right? What's a good recommended
What's the
practice?
right level for
Figuring
the
out-
average user?
Exactly. Or how to
Um,
determine if you are an average user.
it means thinking through. So it depends. I mean, it depends what you're gonna do. If you just want to live your life and mostly don't care, then using Tor or something is fine. If you just sort of creeped out by ads and advertising, stalking. If you're gonna go meet with people who you don't know, or maybe kind of shifty, then you gotta kind of think through what does that mean. So I meet with a lot of people who I have no idea who the hell they are in foreign countries, languages I don't speak, in places I don't speak, and I've assumed they've all Google stalked me before I show up. And I have a pretty good idea of what Google shows about me, because you wouldn't know I had a wife and daughter unless you actually did some serious Google stalking, and that gave you the fact that I had a wife and daughter. But do I have a son? But then at the same time, I guess my concerns can be slightly different, but you go to meet a friend in the city, you haven't seen him for a long time. As far as you know, they're the same, they're your roommate or your friend from high school or something. You haven't really thought about, they're the same person, maybe you did some Googling to see what they've done in their lives, if they're on LinkedIn or whatever, if they're on Facebook. And you go to a coffee shop, maybe this person says, the coffee shop, let's meet in downtown Roxbury. And you're like, okay. Let's meet at midnight in downtown Roxbury. And then you start saying, okay, that seems kind of odd. But maybe you want to look at it. So the first thing most people do, because I watch them do this, they go to Yelp. Is the coffee shop any good? Like, are we meeting at some fantastic coffee shop, or is it just some crap hole that someone picked? What if you put the address in and you find the coffee shop is next to a well-known crack house? Does that change your mind at all? And then do you do basic sort of searches, or do you do basic sort of basically analysis of where you're going, where you're meeting, or do you not even care because you're meeting your friend, you trust your friend? So you don't think about that at all.
Two things.
Yep.
Quick question. You said well-known crack house. How do you figure that out? And
I don't know. I'm sure it's a Google Maps somewhere. This is a crack house.
Police reports.
A 4-star review on this.
It's really good crack.
It's crackhouse.org.
It's the pure stuff.
And the second question is,
Yep.
getting to Facebook. One thing I've noticed is probably the most flagrant security hole I've seen in ages is people tagging the locations of things and pictures of people on Facebook.
How about Facebook automatically tagging faces? Face recognition.
Yeah, but I mean, I've noticed things where it's like, okay, do I really want to RSVP to this event? Upside is they know I'm coming. Downside is anyone with access to this Facebook knows where I'm going to be at that time.
Can you email the organizers and not use? So I don't use Facebook at all. If my friends are like, only people who use Facebook can come to this event, I'm like, that's great. Clearly we're not friends. So can you communicate with them in a means that isn't Facebook and give them the mental computational burden of remembering, oh, and my weirdo nerd friend is going to come too.
The kind of people who do this probably would have their email on Facebook too. So that would work.
But so,
I would look at your Facebook page and say, this is the time to break into your house.
Having fun is great.
I found that often you could look at Facebook without logging in. Like on iBoston, you can look at it, but I don't say anything on it, but I can see when to go to something.
yeah.
So, recently it's been in the news that, say, Germany has been surreptitiously putting malware on people's computers, or the Dutch government is proposing a law that would allow them to put a malware on and surveillanceware on anyone's computer in the world.
Yep.
What are the tools that are out there to detect if this stuff is on there, right? I mean, you go and you look at your process list on, say, Windows or a Mac, with a PS, and who knows what the heck's running? You can't really tell. right? You can Google some of that stuff, but not everything.
So you're going up against an intelligence service as an individual. The level of sophistication there is going to be, the gap in sophistication is going to be significant between you and the intelligence service. Finn Fisher is what the Germans use, and likely the Dutch and likely every other government in the world, because it's very good at hiding itself in your operating system. And it is nothing more than it's nothing more than spyware. I mean, it's a keyboard logger, it can turn on your video camera, it can watch your keystrokes, it can screenshot your screen. It's not all that fancy. The challenge there has been that now governments are realistically using this to target, because it's a, what's the word, force multiplier. One police officer can suddenly infect 1,000 machines and watch all that data and just collect it just in case. Because they attended a rally for something, or they did something, or they were Occupy Boston or something like that. So take the Occupy Boston example. Do I think the Boston Police Department is infecting malware? No, I don't think the Boston Police Department. I think they're using video cameras and fairly traditional police techniques to go after it. If you're going up against DHS Boston or FBI Boston, that's a different thing. Could they use malware? Sure. Thankfully, there are still laws that you have to go to a judge and you have to prove, one, you have to explain all this technology to a judge who probably doesn't understand it. That's your first hurdle. The second one is you have to get permission or basically prove why this person is under probable cause, and then you have to figure out how to infect the person's thing. If you're one that's likely to start opening a lot of images and you get random spams, you're like, well, cool, someone contacted me. You're probably pretty easy to infect. If you have a basic security knowledge and you're sort of somewhat paranoid about it, you get an HTML email from some random place with all these images of protesters, but you don't recognize the address, you don't know who it is. Maybe you treat it differently. Maybe you go to the library and open it up, so you infect the library computer instead of yours. Maybe they assume you're running Windows and they try to install Windows malware on your Mac or your Linux machine. Then at some point, though, so I'm thinking the reverse case has been the victims of domestic violence and cyber stalking I've worked with. You can go online for $50 and buy spyware that will infect your phone, infect your laptop, infect all your stuff. And they, for the most part, have not been very sophisticated. They don't understand what's happening, but they do know that when their camera comes on. Like my camera randomly comes on at times. Why is that? My mouse will sometimes move by itself when I'll be looking at something, I'll be reading a web page, and I won't be touching it, and then the abuser there starts moving the mouse to figure out what's going on, because the screen hasn't changed in a while. They're just trying to read the page, and they're like, what's this? Why did my camera just come on or flash on and off really quickly? Why does my screen freeze every minute or something like that, which is a snapshot? Things like that. Even with Finn Fisher and other tools, it gives out data that something's wrong with your computer. Some activists I know who work in far more hostile countries than the US or anywhere in Europe, they reformat their computer every month. It's like reformat days the first of the month, where they have their data copied in the cloud somewhere, wherever you want to put it, and then they wipe and reinstall their laptop every month, so that any sort of malware that was there is gone. And at worst, they have 30 days of malware infection, not years of data. That takes a lot of pre-planning because the average person doesn't think that far in advance.
Does it help for a Mac to reformat to reinstall the OS every so often?
They do. So they're at the level of paranoia where if they get caught, the government will jail them, likely torture them.
No, I meant, does it help to prevent that by using the OS disk and reinstall it? Because not actually wiping anything, but just reinstalling the OS.
You should wipe, not just reinstall. Because a lot of the reinstalls will load, for your convenience, it will reload a lot of the stuff you had installed already. Which if one of the things you had installed was a malware program, you just now reinstall the malware program for them. They appreciate that, by the way. Makes the job easier. Yeah.
So I've got a little question, which is, if I'm on Linux, am I giving myself a false sense of security versus Windows? Like, am I significantly more secure?
You, I don't know, significant. You are more secure. just by the user. I mean, OS X and Linux tend to frustrate lots of law enforcement because of the security model that's based into it. But even with Linux would be slightly better than Mac at this point, mostly because there isn't a lot of targeted. Because most people just use Think about the other end of this. Most of the criminals, law enforcement targets use Windows. So it's easy for them to pay someone to write Windows malware to go infect the criminal, to figure out to gather data and what's going on. And I would like to believe this is still rare. Like the German government's usage of Finfisher and all that is still rare. It's not the common thing. It's not like, someone's at a protest, I'll infect them. Because they still have this burden of proof and all the stuff they have to prove as part of their case. And most police officers are way overwhelmed. They have way too much crap to do. So, while they could just record the data and save it for some later case, it's far easier to put a team like the Boston Police does, put a team to video record events, and then do face recognition on the video recording so that here's everything that was at the event, and let's see how many faces pop up in our system that we already know. And then if we can figure out who these people are, start tagging them. So that the next event you have, they'll show up and be tagged.
I have a bigger question, if I may.
Yeah.
Because I'm much more worried, so I'm not as worried about being targeted. I'm much more worried about generating data that can make a profile and link me with all these fine people. I love you, but well, like, do you have a sense for how many governments are seriously doing that, or how many criminal organizations are seriously doing that?
You're probably less likely from a criminal organization because they're generally targeting the banks and the government themselves, because that's where the worries are. They're they target the banks because that's where the money is. It's fairly trivial to steal billions of dollars from banks now. And they target the governments because those are the ones who are going to watch them. That's their adversary. Most protesters and most activists and most normal people they can care less about unless they figure they have means to phishing and spyware and all the crap they do. Catch the general person. As for profiles and data, any in general, I don't know. Don't honestly have an answer. I know one of my later sessions today is talk about how I've been surveilled and how the data's come out. So I'm the law enforcement representative for Tor because I don't have long hair and I don't scare them. And I don't immediately come out saying, fuck the police. It's mostly that I've worked in enough situations to understand where the police are needed and what their role is. But as an American, I do worry about the amount of surveillance and lack of freedoms, or freedoms we have on paper but not in real life. And it becomes a balance because many times when you work with victims of violence or whatever, the police are your only recourse. You need them to do their job. You need the base level police officer on the force to show up in a car, do his or her job as they're supposed to do it, even if they don't understand everything else around them. But at the same time, there are plenty of people actually in law enforcement themselves who are scared to death of what the powers are being given. Because when they retire, they no longer have the special powers. Or when they leave the force to go get a better job and get paid a lot more, they lost all their powers. And
Well, they're good people, and they've now realized what's
Yes.
happened in the last
Yes.
10 years from the inside.
Yep, because they get to do it.
Or criminals retributing against them because,
Yep.
the guy you put in jail a month ago really does not need to care about your 4th Amendment rights. Criminal by definition is not by the law. So
Yep.
you may have people that they just threw in jail 3 months ago that just got out, don't like the cops, and works both ways.
So I guess, before I take your question, you're generating data. Yes, if you are individually targeted by anybody, I'm sure they can come up with data, a selective view of data to say, well, this data here looks suspicious, so let's go give you probable cause and all that based on that. That's what happened in Germany, was One of the reasons Germany has so many Tor nodes is because they did data retention directive. As the German government said, the EU said we have to do this, sorry. They didn't really say that, but, and the Germans were going to record all the data. So a bunch of people came up and said, well, if you're going to record all the data, we're going to run a bunch of Tor exit nodes to let you get everyone's data. And we'll completely bury the signal. We'll completely bury the signal in so much noise it'll be irrelevant. And then I will use Tor every day when I'm in Germany so that all my traffic, all you collect is encrypted crap. And you can't do anything about it. And since then it's been deemed unconstitutional and repealed. But that was a concern, was that, especially the Germans, because they sort of had this history of surveillance and Stasi and all that, where personal privacy is really important to Germans, and they were really concerned that the government gets to record everything, and that just because you go to Twitter now and you talk with some friend, what if 2 of your college roommates or high school friends or whatever turned out to be actual child molesters and running a child abuse ring? You're suddenly implicated, and they can go back through your data and say, well, you know, we need to bust open this ring, and I have to meet a number of, you know, you need a number of busts a month or whatever. I can look at your data selectively and say, this slice of data makes you look suspicious. You know, we'll just skip the other 90% of data, but this 10% of data makes you look suspicious, so there's your profile. And then it becomes up to you to say, no, no, here's all my data. Oh, wait. I don't actually get access to my data, so I have to freedom of information request the German government to give me all my data to prove that I'm not the child pornographer they thought I was. Which gets interesting. We're running out of time.
No, I'm just saying pizza's here.
Okay. Pizza's here.
All right.
You had a question.
Oh, so I imagine I could give my mom some small set of steps to get her to clean her machine, but I can't imagine giving her any large set of steps, because the last time I went home, she actually paid money for someone to install a Chrome extension that tracked her. It's like, okay, now I need to remove as much of this as I can. Oh, they have your credit card information. How nice. So,
but it's so easy. I can just click something and buy it.
And so if there's something I could give her, like, here's how you store everything in the cloud or on a backup disk, and here's how you nuke your machine from orbit, that would be great. Is there anything like that for... It's not that she's doing anything super dangerous in her life, it's that she's doing... She's going to get a debit theft or something. So,
Oh, yeah. Okay, go here.
not off the
How to
top.
nuke her machine from orbit. That's pretty obvious to do.
given that every time I come home, it's like, oh wait, you're on Windows 7. Now one day it'll be Windows 8, and there won't be a registry, and I won't be able to like dig through and delete things that look bad. I'm out of date. I use Linux at work.
I don't know.
Is reinstalling from disk?
So reinstalling seems to be what works for lots of people.
Okay.
The problem is then you got to reinstall your apps and all that. The people who are fairly worried about malware and all that, they wipe the disk first, then install, because then there's nothing left on the disk to reinfect you basically. And I don't. I mean, other than pop the CD in and follow the instructions, it's just the knowledge of do I need to do this at all becomes a challenge. Versus kind of just buy some antivirus and assume that I'm not being caught by common malware.
Yeah, I just don't trust antivirus because antivirus isn't going to protect her from things that she's inviting onto the machine.
Antivirus at best catches 50% of anything, regardless of what the antivirus company is saying.
I use Common Sense 2012.
It doesn't.
Could you ghost an image?
You could ghost an image. Some people use virtual machines, where here's my virtual machine for all my online shopping. Here's my virtual machine for banking, because most computers nowadays can do that easily. And you fire up their, there's my. So I mean, I do this. I have a read-only virtual machine I use for Tor's banking. And the certs and all that are saved in it, so if something goes weird, it'll prompt me to say, the cert doesn't match your bank cert. Comically, if you call up the bank and say, what's your SSL certificate and fingerprint? They're like, wait, what do you mean? I think you should talk to our security department. But some people use virtual machines to separate like their lives into this is my, you know, because I have to use Internet Explorer for whatever. Here's where I put all that stuff in there. I keep this separate instead of reinstalling. You know, it's likely that, you know, here's a virtual machine I used to watch YouTube or whatever, and then if it gets infected, whatever, I can just destroy it and build a new one. That might be easier than actual physical reinstall. Yeah.
So I mean, in your mom's case, the next time you have to rebuild her machine, you know, if you're not doing it already, maybe employ a little bit of privilege separation. So, you know, your mom probably doesn't need to be administrator. If you make her just, you know, a crummy old user with, you know, average crummy old user powers, she can get her. There's a little less trouble that you can get herself.
Probably one flavor trouble with that. I need your admin password. The IT guy I hired is saying you can't access.
I have 2 questions.
Okay.
Actually, 3 questions, maybe. Is that okay?
Yeah.
One is that Flickr keeps track of where you are or where they think you are.
Yeah. But you're aware of that?
Yeah. So how do you turn that off? I mean,
I have no idea.
do they have a?
They either ask your browser to tell you where they are, or they do it based on your IP address they see you coming from.
Oh. So you can't do anything about that?
I'm sure you can. I just don't know.
And
But you can go to Flickr from Tor, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so you just use the Tor to go to Flickr.
Because then your browser isn't reporting anything, and your
Right.
IP address isn't sweet.
Right. and then also if you want to get an app from the Mac, like if you want to buy say Final Cut Pro or something, or Skype.
Don't you have to log in to the Mac?
Then that requires your that requires your
Password.
Yeah, you have to log in your username and password for your Apple login.
Yeah, I
to
know,
get
but
into the
it
Mac
also
store.
I
requires.
hate that because even your system updates now require you to log in, which is.
I mean that requires
they do.
your yeah. Well, it also requires your well, I suppose that they won't allow you to, of course, buy it unless you give them your credit card. That's it. But then, of course, everybody will know who you are.
But they will know anyway because you bought their software and they downloaded it, put it on your machine, and ran it.
Well, one of the better ways is to go to the developer site rather than going to Apple. At least it's not all centralized that way.
Yeah.
Another question too. What about, is there any way to consider data security where other people need to keep your information? Like, I mean, for example, social security numbers are supposed to be kept secure. If you do a wonderful job of keeping your wonderful 9-digit PIN secure, and your employer does not, or your bank does not, and I mean, it's just setting up some trouble. But is there anything that can be done about information kept by trustworthy but very clumsy users on your behalf?
So my bank, my old bank in the past, lost my identity 3 times.
Lost your what?
My identity 3 times. And this is like 2001, when they first time they lost it.
They lost any of your cash and they kept
Their attitude was, what they did was they lost a backup tape. They lost all their backup tapes, and people whose data was on those backup tapes, so they started appearing for getting credit cards and signing up for porn and a whole bunch of other stuff. And when I called them about it, they're like, no, we use industry standard security. I'm like, well, industry standard security is crap. So, and
yeah, that one hold up in Massachusetts.
Right. Well,
the
now
Massachusetts law.
But back then, it was basically, basically the bank's attitude was you gave us the data, it's your own damn fault. And it took me hiring a lawyer and some other people hiring a lawyer to sue the bank to say, look, idiots, we have to give you your data because that's the federal law. So we gave you our data and then you lost it. We didn't pay you to lose it, we paid you to keep it. But then they lost it twice more, and then I switched banks, because screw that.
You have a credit union now?
So I just want to, we could wrap it up, because there is pizza, and they're done, so they're starting to eat it. I want to make sure everyone gets some. So.
I guess we're done. Thanks.
Thank you.